Hi, I'm Tony.
I'm Patrick.
And welcome to Cave of the Cross Apologetics. We are working our way through Scott Christensen's book, right? What about evil, right? The defense of God's sovereign glory. And so we are in chapter 11, where he is telling us the story of the scriptures in terms of the narrative of the scriptures and showing that he's using this as a defense of how a theodicy works to explain the problem of evil. Mm-hmm. And he says the theodicy is the story of the scripture, right? That's the basic pretext of what he's getting at here, right? And we've reached that point in the story now where the man and his wife have fallen in the garden and sin has come in and paradise has been lost, right? And so he's working his way through what, Freytek's pyramid, and we've looked at the exposition of creation and fall, and now we're going to move to rising action, the movement toward redemption.
Right. It doesn't just stop at Genesis 3. Why are there so many more pages?
Yeah.
Well, good that there is more pages.
That's right.
Usually
because we need to know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Right. He says what unfolds in the rising action of the story is a movement toward redemption. Right, but within that movement are multiple failures. The rise to redemption is a stumbling, bumbling rise toward redemption, right?
Right.
At least in terms of our side of the story,
mm-hmm.
Right. He says we see two trajectories in the Old Testament. One arc foreshadows divine event redemption. That is God's solution to the conflict. And the other arc chronicles Israel's, and therefore ours as well, failure to redeem herself. Right.
It shows the need for the first prong, which is, God, you just need to do this.
Yeah.
So the first glimpse of these two trajectories comes in the immediate aftermath of Adam and Eve's sin. And that's the nice thing about it is, the fall happens, there's the hiding away from God, and ultimately here's the pronouncement. So to conceal their shame of their nakedness, the couple fashion crude coverings from fig leaves, but the solution is insufficient.
Right. So they try to deal with this themselves.
We've got this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Hurry up.
Yeah.
Before God sees us.
We can fix this. We can fix it. Right.
Right. He's not going to notice anything different. We just have to do this. Here we had hoped for Adam to emerge as the comedic hero, but he disappoints. Adam shows that every human attempts to rectify our sin-racked brokenness run headlong into bankruptcy. I've got it. I'll do it myself. It's fine. Yeah. I should have just given this over to Dad to cut the straight line. Instead, God meets Adam and Eve's failure by supplying them with adequate garments of skin. The gracious act introduces the notions of atoning blood sacrifices for the first time, prefiguring the means of redemption.
Right. So notice all of this is tied up at the very beginning, right? The fall, our attempts to rectify it, and our failures. And then God comes in with these garments and covers, right, as a picture to what we'll see in terms of redemption later on, right?
We see it in the Exodus. We see it in the temple ceremonies. We see it at the time and place that Christ is crucified. We see that occurring.
Yeah. So we see this in this book of 66 books by some 40-odd authors, a central theme, a central story that God is working out. It's amazing, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah. So he says the cryptic promise in Genesis 3:15 indicates another hint at where the redemptive trajectory is going. This primordial prophecy indicates that the divine author had already conceived a plot for this story before the foundation of the world. Right? Speaking to the serpent, and here's the prophecy here, God says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Right? And so Christensen tells us that this verse has been rightly called the proto-evangelium, that is the first gospel.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, very much so. And using a word picture. Not just saying there's going to be a guy, he's going to be the second person in the Trinity. He's gonna sacrifice himself for you.
You're gonna kill him, but he's gonna eventually win, and Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's a word picture.
Here's the story. Yeah. We have here the first prophetic allusion to the one redemptive comedic hero who will defeat Satan, sin, death, and all other evils. The prophecy is full of irony. Crushing, as bruising, as a metaphor for death. The death of the Messiah, the crushing of his heel, is the precise means by which the serpent's skull, as Satan, will be crushed for good. Both crushings are fatal, but only one is final. The wound to the heel will recover, an allusion to the Messiah's resurrection. It's on my foot. Ouch. Darn. The wound to the serpent's head will never recover. That's Hebrews 2.
Right. He's going to be utterly defeated. So the failures of mankind, though, continue to plunge as we witness how post-fall sin and alienation precipitate the first murder, right? Cain and Abel. Right? Yeah. Soon a state of anarchy develops. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Wow, what a sad commentary.
Right.
So the judge then, God as judge, unleashes his just wrath by annihilating the creation through a global flood. But to preserve the seed of the woman, which is what he promised he would do, right? That is the promised redemption. He graciously spares Noah.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, here's a judgment. They're kicked out of the garden. The story doesn't end, and Abel or Cain aren't the chosen one. Seth becomes, or not becomes, but is the one from that line, and so why isn't Seth the embodiment of Christ at that point in time? Well, God has other plans to show us that when He says judgment against sin, He's going to show the world reading the story, the judgment of sin, something so bad that he's required to do drastic, complete action. And that's the flood. But he doesn't take everyone out, even though he could. He has the ability to judge. But what's he doing? He's being true to who his character is, and that's preserving his promise, that covenant that he makes is preserved in the ark, that he closes up, that 2 Peter talks about being an image of Christ, again, a story for a story, and we see that it's God's character that continues the story, and ultimately he judges, but he also preserves. Again, this isn't a story of Noah or mankind's story. It involves mankind, but it's ultimately a story of who God is.
Right, it's God's story.
Right.
Yeah.
God then establishes the descendants of Abraham through a set of far-reaching promises sealed with a unilaterally binding, unconditional covenant that God will maintain.
Right.
The nation will be God's new vice-regents of the earth to magnify his glory. The land promised to Abraham and his descendants echoes in Eden. You will be my people, and you will declare my glory and invite those people back into covenant with me, and then we'll continue on the redemptive Edenistic-ing of the world, and that's what it's supposed to do. Sets it up in the promised land that he's drawing a person out of, making the small people group a mighty nation. In fact, 2 mighty nations come from the seed of Abraham, and ultimately focuses the central actors of God's story in humanity onto the story that he's creating.
Yeah, and so but before the people of God can occupy the promised land, Christensen tells us, God places them for 400 years in a long bondage to the Egyptians, so that by the end of that time they would ache deeply for deliverance, right? So, and then God hears the cries of his people, Exodus chapter 3, and brings about a miraculous exodus to display his redemptive power. Unfortunately, the nation, like her, parents and predecessors, Adam and Eve, repeatedly disobeyed the law given to Moses, right?
Who's this Yahweh guy? I mean, yeah, pillar, fire, smoke, sure. No. Golden calf. That's what we need.
Right. That's what we need. Right.
That's what we need to worship. Here is Yahweh in physical form.
Now we
worship
can see.
it.
Yeah, we can see, touch, and taste, feel, whatever. Right.
So close. So close now. As her transgressions pile up, the nation incites her God to deliver her into exile in the land of her enemies. All right, I'm done with you. We'll start over. No. Through the failures of the inept and immoral kings, along with the lure of every pagan form of idolatry, Israel abandons Yahweh and comes into bondage once again.
Right, so this is just so sad, right? I mean, here's God now, who's the creator, who put all of this together, who's not only telling the story, but is in the story, in and out of the story, right? In terms of, fashioning clothes for Adam and Eve, and I mean all kinds of things, and yet, and giving of the law and through Moses, and yet these people, like we're apt to do, turn away from the Creator God,
right?
Who loves them and who's caring for them and who's trying to redeem them.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and if we're looking at the story, going, those stupid people, why don't they just get it?
Yeah,
the story is there for us to read, and we're supposed to look at our own lives and go, "Me stupid."
Yeah. Why do I
keep doing this? This is Solzhenitsyn's my Gulag Archipelago, where he says, how can I come to the full realization of the horrors of this is when I looked at the guard and I saw me. So it's not the othering of people that we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to see ourselves in this story because how many times do we fall?
Of people.
Right. I've tried it my own way. I don't understand. How come I keep falling? Yeah. Oh, is it because I'm out of line with God's declarative will here? Oh, that's probably, that might be the case. Okay, sure. So her hopes of being redeemed by mere adherence to the law are a failure. Yet through all the defections and the occasional bright moments, God is advancing a solution to human depravity and evil. His grace is upon those who place their trust in him. He provides ever-increasing glimpses of the coming Messiah through covenant promises and prophecies like the Davidic king, Solomon, Rahab, all these people that shouldn't be part of the story seem to be brought in. Especially, reading Genesis, there's such an emphasis placed on the firstborn. Oh, the firstborn gets the double portion. The firstborn is always considered the continuation of those first fruits of the father. And so even awesome Joseph, who doesn't seem to do really anything wrong, maybe when he was younger, telling his brothers and father about dreams one too many times.
That's right. Oh, by the way, you're going to be serving me. Right. Just saying,
It's amazing how in Genesis the focus is but the second child, the subverting your expectations. Oh, sure. Here's the mighty hunter that comes in. He's the apple of his father's eye, and that of course that's who the Messiah will come through. No, it's the trickster guy who his mom can make good food.
Twists and turns and unexpected things seem to happen. Right. That kind of stuff, like you would expect in a really good story.
Story, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, sure. The perfect guy does things perfectly. Okay, sure, fine. Oh, hold on. It's the brother we're following now. I did not see this coming.
Yeah. And so we've seen the exposition of fall and creation, the rising action, right, the movement toward redemption, and now we have reached what Christensen is calling the climax. This is the incarnation, death, and resurrection of the Redeemer, right? When all seems lost, he says, when hope is a rare commodity, when God's people once again come under the oppressive rule of another powerful nation, Rome, a bright and mysterious star appears on the horizon, Matthew chapter 2, right? At the most crucial point in the story, a most remarkable and unexpected event unfolds. So now another twist in the story, right? The author enters directly into the plot and dons the robes of humanity. Not only is this a hero, a man like us, he tells us, but he's also God, very God.
Right. Yeah, and he enters into a humble beginning of a humble people, of a backwater country seen insignificant, that is going through rebellion, that you get like third-rate governors that come in after fourth-rate governors have failed. And Rome is the mightiest mighted that ever mighted. Right. I mean, it is conquering the known world and then some. It's going out to Britannia and going, oh, okay, there's more land out here. We're going to take these guys too, and creating road infrastructure that reaches to all points unknown, so that if you were a Roman citizen and traveled it, no one would want to attack you, because the full might of Rome would come upon you if you attacked Roman citizens.
And all streets, all roads led to Rome.
Yeah.
And so at this point, you say yes, and you yell out, and because it's finally happening. The hero is here. Yeah. And, everything is going to be great, right? No.
In baby form. Oh, so close. But there is another remarkable twist in this plot.
Another remarkable twist.
There's more. The Jews of Jesus' day expected the Messiah to be a warrior, coming in, riding this horse, spear, lance, to redeem the people, the land, kick out the bad guys, and, probably start the hedonistic conquering of the world. But here's where he's going to make his stand. He's going to plant the flag of Israel. They had a flag at the time, and in this symbol conquer. So they saw this great warrior king that Israel, he was going to be the greatest warrior king that Israel ever saw. He was going to be from the son of David. They expect a conventional defeat of Israel's enemies, their Roman oppressors. So even though Isaiah prophesied that the Messiah would die an atoning death to bring about the redemption of God's people, Isaiah 52 and 53, the grand author blinds them to these realities, which again Isaiah prophesied. And John 12 talks about this. They fail to realize that their greatest enemy is not outside of them. Right. It's not the Romans. Yes, they're an enemy. Yes, they're doing bad things. Yes, they're subjecting you. It's not the culture. It's not the Sadducees or the empty rules of the Pharisees. It's not even Satan. In Revelation, Satan is bound up for a bit. And we're still bad. Yeah. We're still bad. The true enemy is something deeply rooted within. Hatred of your brother is like murdering him. Lusting after a woman is committing adultery. It's not outside. Those things influence. Those things are important. But ultimately, what are we trying to change? The heart. Right. No ordinary means of power can defeat the evil that resides in the human heart. That conflict cannot be overcome by a conventional hero. And we see it within the mind and heart of Adam and Eve. Right. And it's Satan influences, but they're the ultimate deciders, and that's what needs to be changed and redeemed and made more perfect.
Exactly, right. And so God comes in, rips out our heart, tears it into pieces, and gives, no. Strangely, he says, sin and evil will be vanquished by God's weakness, not his power, right? Jesus' victory will be achieved through his voluntary vulnerability before wicked men. Nobody sees this coming, he tells us. And yet, in that moment of utter weakness, the greatest power in history is put on display. Right, Satan believes that he's defeated Jesus just as he defeated the first Adam. Right, yeah. He's won. He's dancing. Right, the little victory dance. Right. Right. He's crushed the Messiah's heel. Yet it seems that Satan himself is blinded to the prophecies of Isaiah. Right, that said he had to suffer, and he's blinded to his own crushing defeat. Right.
So Jesus doesn't come into the world just to die. He comes to die and rise again. The success of what the incarnate Lord of the universe achieves on the bloody cross makes sense only when 3 days hence, before decay sets in, shocked onlookers gaze into his empty tomb. It's the holding of the breath. There are 3 days of holding the breath. Yeah. Why isn't the story ending? Yeah. Why are there more pages to this book?
Right. What's going on here? I mean, he's dead. Right.
A Braveheart, William Wallace cries freedom and dies. And, things happen after it and stuff like that. He inspires a few people, but, Scotland still is under monarchistic rule. And it was a good story. There's some redemption. There's some, but ultimately we learn, is freedom worth dying for?
Right.
Nope. The breath is exhaled when you take a breath in and see an empty tomb. It's shocking. Something no one thought would come.
Right. And so we move now to the next portion of this drama, right? He calls this the falling action.
Right.
This is the establishment of the Redeemer's kingdom. Jesus' death and resurrection represents the climax of the story of redemption, but his ascension into heaven and exaltation at the right hand of his Father marked the beginning of the falling action of the plot, wherein his kingdom is beginning to be established and takes root in the broad soils of redemption, right? So, yes, he dies, but he rises again. There's an empty tomb, and he ascends into the heavens, and he is exalted at the right hand of the Father, and thus redemption begins. Right.
And we still see stories within the main story, and we see it in other stories as well. Aslan's resurrected. That's a key point. Now it's to take out the witch, and that's another story. But here's something amazing that happened that was unexpected, that was tragic, and then suddenly became glorious. And now we deal with the repercussions of the climax.
Right. So he's accomplished redemption. It's complete. It's thoroughly done. And now he's bringing in the harvest.
Right.
Yeah.
But this defeat of Satan and the forces of evil will not come easily. The progress of redemption is marked by a polarizing struggle between those whom God redeems and the systemic evils that oppose it. These evils stem both from within, the inner sinful corruption of the flesh. It's a removal of the stony heart, given the heart of flesh, but we're still in a fallen world with a fallen nature that we're changed so that we can do good, that we can glorify God. And from without, the world, the devil, the focus on the world at that point of Scripture. I mean, there's a reason that Apostle Paul and James and Jude, and they still talk about Satan. They talk about, being a thorn. He's a thorn in the flesh, that he's going to come and deceive you. And there's going to be these other antichrists that come up that kind of stem from him. But ultimately, we're in conflict with the world because we've been made opposite of the world. So we're mirrored from them. They're the ones with the goatee on the other side that are trying to conquer by the sword.
So it's as if every Christian is playing out the redemption story in their own individual lives, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing is being played out in our own individual lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes sense of why the Spirit has to come and set in our hearts, because from there, the temple is built in our heart, and it needs to expand out. And it needs to expand out into our body, into our mind, into our actions, into the way we speak, the tongue, talked about a lot, especially in James, to our families, to our neighbors, to our church, to our government. I keep going out to space, to Mars. We need to conquer Mars in the name of Jesus Christ. Absolutely. But Christ will consistently magnify his glory of the Father by transforming recalcitrant sinners and expanding his kingdom to include ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. Something that shouldn't happen because we're tribal people that need to ostracize ourselves from the other. No, we tell people to come in. We're Israel now. We're talking about, hey, we have the meeting place of God that you can be redeemed from and glorify him and be in right creation. That's what we're calling them to be, in right creation. And we don't call them to a building. We call them to turn over their heart.
Person.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, the denouement. This is the consummation of the Redeemer's kingdom. The denouement of the story marks the consummation of Christ's kingdom when the Redeemer King returns to earth to establish his rule forever, and the work of redemption is finally completed, right? Then comes the end. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15, where he delivers the kingdom of God the Father after destroying every rule and every authority and every power. And so at this point, several things, Christensen tells us, will happen to fully, untie every loosed knot in the plot line, right?
First, every follower of Christ will experience full restoration with resurrected bodies fit for life in a newly restored paradise. And again, that's an act of God. God does the veiling like he did for Adam and Eve. He's going to veil us with a new resurrected body, and then he is the one that restores paradise. Second, the creation itself, which was subjected to futility by God as a result of the fall, will undergo its own bodily death in 2 Peter 3, and then the redemption in Romans 8. What he said he wouldn't do with water again, next will be done by fire. And fire as an image of purification, of burning away, of the gold refined in fire, and all the straw, all the paper, those things are burned up, and only what's left is what's good and malleable and useful to God. Paradise will be restored with a new heaven and a new earth emerging from the ashes of the old creation.
Paradise restored, right? And so he ends this chapter, right, by kind of raising a question, right? He says, a story without evil. He says, how can we be sure that this is the way that it had to be, right? It's not possible that God, or is it possible, he asks us, that God could have offered a better story that left evil out of the picture? And he says, the question then is, could his glory be supremely manifested to his creatures in any other storyline? And he answers, no. We must contend otherwise, right? Yeah.
Right. So was the fall good? Yeah, in the sense that we see more evidence of God's character and nature so that he can be glorified even more. So it's neat. I really like this chapter, and chapter 10 and 11 were a really good one. I thought 9 was excellent, really, really good. 2 was also good. So this is just a neat way to think of you kind of hear the same story over and over again. You're like, okay, yep, I've read Genesis before, but now you can read Genesis just in kind of that different way that makes you think of, here's a story and here's what we're supposed to see and get out of. It's not just things happen and they happen to ultimately get to 30 AD and then 33 AD, and then a big event happens, sure, and then we can all wear a symbol of a T around our necks until we die and go to heaven. Yeah. No, there's more to the story. It's all fitting together, and one of the reasons we do expositional studies and Christians not divorcing themselves from the Old Testament is because to divorce the Old Testament is to divorce major portions of God's redemptive story arc and fruitful stories that we can see ourselves in, and not only us, but also God's relationship with us, and then ultimately seeing God glorified in those moments, even at a time before a Redeemer comes into the world, and pointing towards that. That's the purpose of pointing towards the crux, the climax of human history, which is the incarnation and the cross and the resurrection. Mm-hmm. Pretty neat stuff.
Right. So he tells us that it's not enough for a mere showing of the story, though, right? Which is what he says, a telling of the story. He says there must be a fuller telling of its meaning to clarify its remarkable power. There must be an exposition, as you mentioned, right, of the central theme that drives the plot of this grandest of all stories. There must be a theology, right, a teaching of it. And so next, he says, we're going to turn to that crucial explanation and thus to introduce the theodicy that makes the best sense of this particular trajectory that he's shown us.
Yeah, include the propositions that we kind of exculted out of there at first. So hopefully you've see where he's going. You are enjoying the slowness of it, and that's what I appreciate. As I think Scott Christensen could have made this book probably half as much and probably gotten the same amount of material out of it. But laying the foundation and kind of dealing with what's kind of been commonly accepted in kind of the academics, and then showing the issues with it, and then laying a foundation, and then talking about where he's going and how it fits into everything is exactly what we want to see in a theodicy. We want to see not just the explanation, but a why for the why kind of deal.
Good.
So you can check out the full episodes. If you're watching, you can listen on all the podcast areas. You go to caveofthecross.com. If you're listening and want to watch, we're on YouTube and Odyssey. So you don't have to give evil YouTube its due. We don't make money off YouTube either way, but it's nice that there are other platforms out there, and you can check out the short cut-ups of the episode. So if you want to go back and say, what were they talking about? But I kind of want a short, succinct time period to listen to or to share. Those are available on the video platforms as well. And then also there's a spot on our website for the short clips. And so you can find them there. You can also find book reviews. And I've been doing a bunch of church history for kids at this time. And that's been really fun to do. I'm halfway through, or not halfway, but I'm going towards my year-end reading goal. And I'm slightly cheating by using these short books, but it's so that I can read big books like What About Evil by Scott Christensen. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.